I think we watch too many movies, and we don't play enough games. So, I think I'm just going to play some games. And, of course, I want to focus, though, on games that have some synchronistic meaning to me. And I want to kick it off with this game called Welcome to the Future. Let's just jump right into it. We'll talk as we go. This is probably one of my favorite games of all time. Blue Sky Entertainment. This was the company. But really it was more like a band or an art collective. This game, I believe, was released in 1995. To double check that, but I think that's right. But maybe even tell us, is there like a copyright in here somewhere? Tips. But you can see, to contact Blue Sky Tech, email to bse1@aol.com. To join Blue Sky Beta Group, contact bse1@aol.com. Look at these system requirements, too. And look how amazing the art and the interfaces are already. This is just one of the sort of most psychedelic CD-ROMs ever released, I would say. And just one of the coolest CD-ROMs ever released. Let's see here. Speed. This is telling us how to optimize the game. The truth about the Windows version of this game is that it barely ever ran. It had problems even back in the day. The Mac version, I think, ran much better, although I didn't play that until much later. And also, I grew up with the Windows version, so I still prefer it. So this is the Windows version running in Windows 3.1 in DOSBox. That was finally my solution for getting it running. And this is also a version that I restored. Like, I went in and... It's like a complicated story, actually. The Mac version has higher quality assets than the Windows version because the Windows version used QuickTime compression for everything, including the still images. However, I kind of preferred the Windows version because it has all these extra MIDIs. I think actually the creators of the game didn't even like this MIDI stuff that much, but I liked it. It's because it's part of my nostalgia for the game, I suppose. So anyway, what we're playing now is a weird hybrid. It's like the Windows version, but I brought in all the assets from the Mac version to try to get the highest quality picture possible. And discovered during that actually there had been changes made to the Windows version to some of the assets. So I went through and kind of, I did actually a lot of like hand restoration of the individual images to go. I just did a tremendous amount of very nerdy work on this because I wanted to preserve it in the best possible way. And so here's the little setup here. Welcome to the future. Tells you how the cursor works. How great is it that the cursor is an infinity symbol? That should tell you right away the kind of game we're about to get ourselves into. If you find yourself lost in this world, the Pharaoh's touch will return you to the beginning. It begins on a mountaintop under clear blue sky, where ancient travelers once roamed and made their presence known. Recorded here is the very essence of their thought and vision, waiting to be discovered by the next generation. Now, I find this very interesting indeed. We'll see that it works as a kind of a meta statement in the game, because this could be talking about the game developers themselves who recorded here the essence of their thought and vision. It also works as a little metaphor about unconscious forces, I would say. Really, I would say this game is a kind of red book. It's a documentation of some people who were having a deeply psychedelic, imaginative trip with the unconscious. I'm kind of like the number one super fan of this game, in case you haven't noticed. And I had an email relationship with one of the creators of this game, Lyle Engel, who did the music and a whole lot of the artwork. And so, we had a little bit of email chatter back in the 90s when I was a kid. I was like 13. And then much later as an adult, actually right before my first major confrontation with the unconscious, I got back into this game and put a bunch of GIFs and stuff I had made of it up on a Tumblr I was running at the time. I wanted to make sure it was okay with Lyle, so I tracked him down online and sent him a message. And then we got to talking, and I showed him this version that I had made. I made this back when I was studying at Brown. So anyway, sort of as a result of our conversations about the game, he ended up getting it ported to Android. So you can actually buy this game now if you have an Android device. I don't have an Android device, so I haven't been able to play the remaster, unfortunately. But it's possible. I think it might even be using the assets that I restored from this version. Maybe, I don't know. But so anyway, this game is super awesome, and if you're into weird psychedelic stuff and weird Jungian stuff, actually, I'm going to try to make an argument as we play it here that this is really a very interesting psychological document. And if you're just into like great psychedelic music as well, you should really check out this game. This game was created in a kind of THC temple of some kind. These guys sort of built a studio in like a beach house, I think, in Malibu somewhere. It was just like these three dudes jamming and making all this art in Photoshop, and had managed to attract some venture capital just to make that happen, because Myst had just been released and it had been this huge success, and there was this giant boom of like strange right hemispherically oriented video games that were more like dreams being sold to an adult audience. And there were just a ton of bizarre titles that came out around that time, some of which I have here in my weird little CD-ROM archive. Games like The Dark Eye, it's an excellent one. This is all based on Edgar Allan Poe stories. There's Myst itself, obviously. Lighthouse was incredibly excellent. Obsidian is a really, really, really interesting game about consciousness in some way. It allowed this game to exist, although in the end I think it was kind of a commercial failure. And still, I think, just has not really been appreciated for the cool piece of art that it is. But I love it, and I love it as much today as I loved it in the 90s. We're going to select Challenge Mode, play it for real. But so because this game is the result of some people taking some sort of psychedelic drug and making a whole bunch of artwork, I think it's something that exists in natural conversation with Jungian ideas about interaction with the unconscious. And I mean, we're looking at a symbol of the self here, right at the beginning, this kind of strange holographic mountain that bridges something gaseous to something liquid, the above to the below, and then welcome to the future. It sort of orients you in the direction of something out of time, which is what we might say about the self. Okay, start. Tells us to seek the signs, and then we just find ourselves in this mountainscape, we had that little bit of setup that the travelers roamed here and recorded the essence of their thought and vision. Let's turn this up so we can hear Lyle's excellent music. So this is these are photographs of a trail that actually exists in Malibu. At one point, I tracked it down on Google Maps and mapped it all out. It's actually pretty true to the actual space, although they took some liberties here and there to make it a more compelling game world. Isn't this just the most stoned out thing you've ever seen in your life? It just glows with pot vision, you know? It's so beautiful, actually. I love the you can see the marks of the tools on it. You can see this sort of smudging from this Photoshop smudge and blur brushes and stuff. The colors and the saturation has been all pumped to give it this tripped out feel. Okay, so now here we're encountering our first sign. What the game calls signs, but what I would call symbols, really. And so that's an interesting one to begin with. That's definitely some kind of a union of a two. The pillar in the middle. This is a very strange one. It's kind of spermoid. Then that's definitely like a no circle. So you can probably hear the audio's breaking up a little bit. That's because this game is, my modern day computer still struggles to run this game. It's pushing DOSBox a bit, as well as run Windows in it and then run this really intensive game in Windows. I assume that the Android version runs very, very smoothly. I love stuff like that in these old games. It's just this image for ambience here. You can sort of gaze out across the mountainscapes. So we wouldn't have been able to access this if we didn't have this symbol. The symbols work as keys that unlock areas of the environment. So cool. And see, I think just right away, these sounds are so great. But I think right away we have this kind of metaphor for the unconscious. First of all, we're looking at a symbol that describes two systems reaching across a barrier. Then that creates an opening in the world, inside of which is this strange mechanical understructure, which then supplies you with a magical key. A different sort of key. These are letters down here. And they're eventually going to spell the word voyage. Although they spell the word through this Greek character font. So that thing down there that looks like an S, it's actually a V expressed through this weird font, because they didn't pick how to describe. They didn't pick the letters that would visually resemble the word voyage. the ones that happen to be the same are the same, and the ones that aren't. So it is actually the result of running something through a code or a cipher, which again, to me, points in the direction of weird kind of unconscious notions. Makes the whole thing quite dreamy, if nothing else. But it already tells us that the world of this game is the kind of world that contains an understructure or an underground. And that by interacting with that underground through the recovery of symbols, it will supply you with magical letters that eventually explicitly unlock a higher degree of consciousness through the voyage that you undertake at the end of the game. Okay, so that's the structure of the game in a nutshell. Gameplay-wise, it's like a big maze, mostly. But really, the game world is a container for all of this excellent art and music. The way that I always thought of this game is kind of as the best enhanced CD that never was. Those of you who were around back then probably remember enhanced CDs. Those were like music albums, but that you could then... They had like a data ring on the CD, so you could then pop them into your computer and access multimedia content. Some of them had like little game-style things on them, like Mike Oldfield released some stuff like that. Songs of Distant Earth. So, that release and certain other things were like The Residents released this really weird thing called Bad Day on the Midway, I think, and some other one too. There are just lots of things, but this one is the coolest one. It just probably should have been marketed that way. I think if it was like a band release that then had this insane game on it, it might have, I don't know, it might have connected a little bit more. Anyway, that's always how I approached it, and I loved it in that way. It's this trippy album with this amazing world and strange, like, bunch of visual art attached to it. So that thing we were just looking at is a map of the underworld. That'll be important later as we learn to navigate it. I always think that rock there looks a bit like a sphinx, which makes a lot of sense because we've got Tut down here. Here, we'll go up here and well, actually, do we have the sign for this yet? I'm not sure that we do. I'm sorry, I can't call them signs. I'm going to call them symbols. No, we don't.
Seek the sign.
So that's what happens when you don't have the symbol. Tut tells you to seek the signs.
Seek the sign.
I forget where we acquire that one. So this is like where Tut lives in the world. He'll give you hints.
First note of final night.
What?
First note of final night. First note of final night.
The first note will find the light, or something. You never understand what Tut says. It occurs to me that some people might drop into this video because they're interested in this game and have no idea what I am or what a sync century is or what any of this weird Jungian stuff was that I was alluding to before. So maybe it's worth giving some kind of little description of that stuff or some kind of overview of it as we roam around and just sort of collect signs for the moment. Once we get all the signs, then we can go anywhere we want in the environment, so we might as well just try to do that all as rapidly as possible at the outset, I suppose. I am a person who believes in the idea of the unconscious in probably a deeper and crazier way than the average humanoid. I remember this one took a long time to restore. The Mac asset had a different look to that pathway, but I wanted it to look like the Windows version, so I had to rebuild it. I just love this. I love this photography. It all looks so good and so cool. It's still, it still looks pretty good for a game of its age. These images hold up pretty well, I think. But anyway, I think that the unconscious is populated by dynamic agencies. Let's grab this one. The unconscious, in my view, is really a world. The same world that people like Blake were in touch with as a lived reality. And the unconscious is very visually expressive. And one of the things that it does, it generates weird symbols like this. In dreams and also in the art that human beings make and so on. So I don't think art really originates from consciousness that much, from sort of ego conscious awareness, you see. I think the things that are good in art come from somewhere very deep and ineffable in us, that is unconscious. I love how this one's just sitting in a tree. And I love that sound design. And so I think something very special happens when we make art. I think that we are interacting with beings in the psyche. And I say being instead of complex or subsystem or something strange like that, because I've interacted with some of these things, and they, as far as I can tell, that they're like this beings you meet in your dreams. I always call these Dick Mountain, or like Dick Rocks or something. Okay, that's just another map. I'm also a person who believes, and this is a pretty standard belief in the Jungian world, I would say, that there is a layer to the unconscious which is really truly non-local, that can indeed receive information from the future. And I think that this game may have received a tiny little precognitive fragment related to 9/11, which is the main focus of this YouTube channel, and analyze media for precognitive traces of that event. Let's see here. Can we go into the underworld yet? Might be fun to just take a peek. Yeah, because that's one of the very first symbols we find. We won't. I'm not going to teleport through, but I just want to show that this exists here. Is this or is this not just like the dopest thing? Like, look at this. I love how the motion is like scored with a whoosh. I seriously do love, like, the sound is so... It implies like anti-grav tech, you know?
Decide.
We don't have that one yet. Where does that one live? That enables kind of the album player. Okay, now we have that one so that we can get to the graffiti keys. Do we want to watch? Yeah, we might as well jump right into this. This is the short one, I think, the Electric Rain sequence. So there's a couple areas in this overworld that will transport you into some kind of simulated DMT trip, basically. They enact slideshows of all this crazy Photoshop art set to all these great pieces of music. So in a sense, this is where the game sort of becomes more like an album. We're going to kind of watch a music video that consists of like mostly still images. Let's just do it. So while this runs, I'm going to talk about Jung in the Red Book.
We need more understanding of human nature because the only real danger that exists is man himself.
Jung was a person who interacted with the unconscious in a very direct way. And in his interactions with it, one of the things that happened to him was that he produced a whole bunch of artwork, which he put down along with a bunch of mythic narrative elements and other sorts of things, and something called the Red Book, which is like this incredible illuminated manuscript in style. And see, I just think that this game, Welcome to the Future, is the same sort of thing. It's an illuminated manuscript in CD-ROM form. It tells us this myth about these travelers that leave these symbols, and then there's this whole underworld, and it's like this quest of... actually, what does it say on the back of the box? The incredible quest of discovery, art, and music. Well, exactly. That sounds like the individuation process. Which is the term Jung gave to the ongoing process of integrating unconscious contents and thus becoming more whole. So, that was a really short one. There's one later that's quite a bit longer and runs through several songs. So we gained another piece of the voyage, and then we can also go in and look at any of the images and see their titles as well. For instance, this one is called Why Time Goes By. In the middle it says good. I love that one. What was I trying to say? Sorry, I'm a bit tired, and I'm realizing, gosh, it's a big task to try to explain the entire idea of the Jungian individuation process and all of this, so I'm not going to do that, I guess. I would just point you in the direction of the Wikipedia articles about all that stuff if you want to know WTF I'm talking about with all that. Basically, I just think that when you make art in a particular sort of way, in a way that is in deep conversation with these unconscious elements of yourself, there really is a process through which your psyche will reveal to you a lot of self-referential wisdom about what it means to be a human being. You know, it just amounts to saying that good art contains actual spiritual insights, often. And one of the really interesting things about this game is how it largely consists of map making I mean, once we get into the underworld, the only way to get through it is to really map it out node by node, because it's just this huge, dense maze. And that's just a very nice metaphor for the individuation process as a whole. It really is, in many ways, about developing maps. This one says, listen with your eyes. I love that. There's this kind of insane crop circle design. Now, this isn't the set that contains the potential 911 precogger. I think that exists in the other longer sequence. Okay, let's exit this area. We almost have all the symbols up there. We must be missing something further down this way. So the funny thing is that this game models the individuation process. I suppose that's really what I'm trying to say. It models it probably in many ways at once. I think that the way the game was made involves some probably like real life individuation for the people that made it. I would imagine that it was in some ways a process of self-discovery to make all this art and build this huge, beautiful thing out of it. But then the structure of the gameplay is this big sort of mapping of the underground is a model of the individuation process as well. There's song lyrics faintly overlaid there. It's one of the things about we haven't heard it yet, but a lot of the music in this game is like full-on vocals and lyrics and all this stuff. It really is like an album in that way. Okay, I'm going to have Tut teleport us back to the beginning now. I will help you. And now we can access some of these different areas. The strange thing about it, for me, is that this game called Welcome to the Future really was showing me my future when I played it, because I eventually went through the individuation process in this incredibly intense way. And when I went through that process, this game was very much at the forefront of my mind as a kind of accidental model. I kept relating things back to this, as first just kind of aesthetically, but then eventually as I began to understand the individuation process more, I began to say, oh yeah, I get it. This game really does represent it in some interesting and amazing way. So we'll hear the vocals for the first time here. So this is one of the songs. It's called Coming Soon. When you go to the music player, you can hear the real song. This is just like a little loop from it. And then these keys trigger vocal sections from the song. So.
Think about all the ancient ways. Seems they had a lot to say.
There we go. How do you know they're not your friends? Exactly. I believe that says Einstein sucks. Again, in this kind of like Greek character font cipher. Well, what should we do? Should we go watch the other big vision sequence? Or should we go into the underworld? I kind of feel like exploring the underworld a little bit, maybe. This is a pretty long game. We're not going to get through it tonight, even though it looks like we've amassed all this stuff. In order to get the last few voyage letters, you have to go through the underground, and that's really the bulk of the game is going to be down there. And it is truly a vast space they built. I remember it taking quite a while to beat this game back in the day. Okay, down we go.
From his country already since centuries. His most important piece is the so-called genetic disc. Here you can see a disc made out of lydite, a very hard stone.
This thing is like
the same hardness as
a scan of a real
but the structure of
something.
lydite.
I don't remember exactly, but I remember seeing images of that thing on like UFO blogs, or this is way before blogs, GeoCities websites and stuff. So here we are, and there are two. Oh, I think this is another. So see, there's a whole other sort of symbol set down in the underground. Right, there's two elevators. The other one being over here. And this takes us into this big cloud room. I believe all this was done in Strata. Stratavision or Strata 3D. Something like that. So I should already have like the pen and paper out and be like mapping these nodes, but I just feel like kind of wandering around in a moment, just to give everybody kind of an overview of like how gorgeous this game is.
Shoot the sign.
Oh, bummer, we don't have the sign.
I will help you.
I love this part. Okay. That's it for now. See you all in the future.
Think about all the ancient ways. Seems they had a lot to say. No one knows how to read the signs. Secrets lost to the sands of time. What the hell are you waiting for? Get yourself right through that door. Something cries from the other side. Something from which you